بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته واقتفى أثره إلى يوم الدين. So this is the last lesson of this level. Next week we'll have the test, inshallah. So we were supposed to talk about memorization. There's a few things. Some of them are not in a specific order. I took the time to write this on the board. I will tell you what it is in a minute. Of course, people over the centuries of the Islamic history have been known to have memorized the Quran and many other things. I mean, some of the scholars are known to have memorized over like 1 million hadith. They relied on memory more than anything else, let alone the Quran. The Quran was the first stage or the first step that they used to do, and then they will memorize other things. So they used to memorize the Quran at a young age and then go on to the hadith and other sciences. So today, in many Muslim countries and many communities, people, they try to imitate, but they are not imitating them properly. So they are basically trying to get people to memorize, even though this was initially supposed to be the first step, but it became the first and the last step. So they memorize the Quran and that's it. They may even be called scholar or sheikh or whatever else title that they use depending on the country, and that's it. They memorize the Quran and they are guaranteed a place in paradise, and that's it. There's no other steps. Even though in many countries, the people who memorize the Quran, they may not understand what they memorize, whether they speak the Arabic language or not, right? So I personally helped organize Quran competitions where people would memorize part or the whole Quran, and this was an encouragement for people to memorize the Quran. But we do encourage people to understand what they memorize, right? The idea of trying to memorize the whole Quran without understanding a single word is not as good as memorizing a small part with understanding. I mean, understanding a small part with understanding is much more beneficial than memorizing the whole thing or a big portion of the Quran without understanding. So this is like memorizing versus understanding. Understanding of the words, of the meaning, of the tafsir. So I personally, obviously, recommend that we should concentrate more on understanding the Quran or understanding what we memorize or learn, instead of just trying to memorize the whole thing and be called the Hafid or whatever other titles. Obviously, for those who are interested in memorizing, we learned that there is a short-term memory, as we all know, and we have seen it in our lives. There's a short-term memory and there's a long-term memory. The short-term memory can store things that are put in there for quite a while, but it's not going to stay there for the long term, which means that a person may memorize a page and he would think that he got it, right? He got it, and he's not going to forget it. And then after a day, he will still be able to recite it again after a week, after 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But then in the long term, he will not remember it because he didn't make enough effort to move it from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. And this process, of course, takes more effort and takes more time. And they say that the long term, I was amazed to learn that the long-term memory has an unlimited capacity. Unlimited capacity. Right? And that's why, of course, we cannot compare ourselves today with the people of the past, where they didn't have as many distractions as we have today. Right? We were talking about phone numbers. Today, people don't memorize phone numbers because they have them stored in their phone book, right, on the cell phone. So they don't rely on memory as much. If you want to calculate something, you have a calculator, right? Or you have it on your phone or an actual calculator and so on. So if we don't use the memory, if we don't give it things to do, then it's not going to be as strong, right? It's not going to be as strong. Now, something that I thought that a lot of people don't know is that people who memorize the Quran, and we see this during the month of Ramadan more than any other time of the year, where in many communities they bring somebody from outside to lead the Salatul Taraweeh. And for most people, they think that this person, because he memorized the Quran a long time ago when he was small, he would just stand there and start memorizing or start reciting without having to spend many hours that day prior to the night preparing and reviewing, right? For most people. He cannot just stand there and recite that part that's scheduled for that night. He has to review it quite a bit. Not only that, I mean, year round, he's reviewing that, whatever he memorized. If it's the whole thing, he's reviewing the whole thing year round. So in many communities, what they do is that they wait until last minute, and then they will try to find somebody to lead the Taraweeh. As a result, the people who have the ability to do it or had memorized the Quran are given a very short notice. Say 2 or 3 weeks before Ramadan, say, okay, you're going to do it. And they expect this person to just stand there and not make a single mistake. And if he makes mistakes, he will be doomed. A lot of people will be complaining. Not understanding that this person was not given enough notice. And I know in some masajid, I asked many of these people who lead the Taraweeh, and I've seen it myself. Some of them are given 2 days notice. 2 days. Say again, 2 days you're going to lead Taraweeh because we are stuck, we don't have anyone. You're going to do it. So people don't realize how much effort it takes to prepare for this, to prepare for leading the Taraweeh. And I always say that we know for certain that Ramadan is going to come. It's not like the Hilal. It's maybe we're going to see it today, maybe not. Yeah, even if we don't see it today, we're going to see it tomorrow. So it will start. It will come. Next year it will come again, unless we all die. All right? Then it's not going to have any significance. But Ramadan is going to come every year. It's not like this brother. I told you the story of this man who is a friend. He used to work at this company, and he said there was this security guy. He thought he was practicing. So he told him, Ramadan is coming next week. So the security guy said, again? Yeah. So this is how we see Ramadan, or at least the people who are in charge of the masajid and the musallas and stuff. They think that it came by surprise. It caught them by surprise. We didn't know it was coming, but then it came. So let's try to find somebody. So I was saying that a lot of people don't have an idea of how much effort it takes to review and prepare. It is one thing that you are reviewing it for yourself, right? Let's say you memorize the whole Quran and you are reviewing every day, every week, every month. It's another thing when you are put in this position where you are responsible for leading the Taraweeh, and people have expectations, and they don't expect you to make many mistakes. They expect you to make a mistake once in a while. People will get really mad if the reciter makes a lot of mistakes. And the poor guy is making a lot of mistakes because he didn't get enough notice. Now, last week, two sad news about, since we're talking about the memorizing the Quran. The first one was a guy, an old man from back home, who I told you the story of this man I'm sure here in the Tajweed class. He used to be very humble, and at his old age, I knew him when I was small, and he was already old. Like he was probably retired already. And he used to review the Quran in the masjid. We used to see him like walking, going back and forth, and he used to recite and review the Quran every week. Complete the Quran every week. This is what he told me. And he started sitting with us in the Tajweed halaqah and trying to learn Tajweed because he hadn't learned the Tajweed. So he used to make a lot of mistakes in terms of Tajweed, and people used to not like praying behind him in Ramadan when he was leading. So he died this last week. Right after him, Sheikh Muhammad Ayub. Sheikh Muhammad Ayub, obviously, I always talk about him. He's my teacher without me having met him ever, right? And he's probably one of the most unique reciters of this modern age. I don't know if you saw this on YouTube, which was an interview with him, and he was asked what is your wish? He said that my wish is to come back and lead the people in the Masjid al-Nabawi, because in the last 20 years he was taken out of the Masjid al-Nabawi. And I remember him when I was small. We used to listen to him. He was famous because the Imam of the Haram are always more famous than others, and obviously because he had a unique voice. So he was taken out about 20 years ago. And subhanAllah, last Ramadan, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this, he was put back in the Masjid al-Nabawi. So his wish came true last Ramadan. And it is said that his second wish, I didn't hear this myself, but I read it. His second wish is that the last of his children, which is a daughter, would finish memorizing the Quran, because all his children, I don't remember how many, he probably has a lot of children, mashallah. The last of his children, a daughter, finished the Quran that night, just before he died. So he went to the graduation ceremony after Salat al-Isha, and then he slept, and then he woke up at 3 a.m. He felt really hot, and then I think he slept with the intention of waking up before Fajr to pray Tahajjud, and then he never woke up. So both of his wishes came true just before he died. Now, going back to the topic of memorizing the Quran, you will find, of course, many books talking about the topic. I mean, as in any other topic, they will start with the ikhlas. The intention is that a person who memorizes part of the Quran or the whole Quran will have to have an intention that he's doing this for the sake of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. That's I guess it's pretty obvious for us. The second thing is the tajweed, for him to be able to read it properly so that he can recite it, so that he can memorize it properly. If he doesn't memorize it properly, if he memorizes it wrong, whether it is the wrong pronunciation or the wrong rules of tajweed, then it is very difficult, if not impossible, to fix. So he has to be able to, or he has to learn the rules of tajweed, or at least the minimum, the basic rules of tajweed, so that he memorizes it properly. And also he has to set a certain amount a day. I always tell my students, those who are interested in memorizing, you can put your own limit, because people are different. I knew a brother who used to memorize, who actually memorized 7 juz in 7 weeks. A juz a week. To memorize a juz a week, that's a lot of pages a day. A lot of pages. That's almost 4 or 5 pages probably a day. And he didn't stop at that. He used to memorize the hadith as well. He memorized many hadith. And he told me that because he was a physician, he told me, I used to memorize books, medicine books that are this thick, He said, and then realized that, why don't I memorize the Quran? Right? And then he started, and every time I meet him, he had memorized like quite a bit. And I prayed behind him, actually. He doesn't make many mistakes. It's not like, you can have a person memorize quickly, but then forget quickly. That's the other issue. We'll get to it, inshallah. And also you will find that something I mentioned at the beginning of the Tajweed course, that you have to stick to the same mushaf. The same mushaf meaning the same design, right? If you expect an ayah to be on the right side, on the top of the right-hand side, then it has to be there all the time, right? You don't want to be changing mushaf. This ayah is here today, and then the next mushaf is going to be on the left side, or it's going to be on the bottom of the page. So it has to be the same design. And that's one of the reasons I recommend the Mus'haf of Medina, because it's available everywhere. It's available everywhere. But you can have your own Mus'haf as long as you stick to the same Mus'haf, the same design. That will help in memorizing. Of course, saying it, repeating the ayah when you are memorizing with a loud voice, even if you are looking at the Mus'haf, this will help greatly in memorizing. Not moving from one surah to another. I remember learning about this, and I didn't realize how it is practiced until I found out the hard way. Right? Sometimes you read something, you may understand it, and you may practice it the way you understood it, but it may be practiced differently. For example, they say you don't move from one surah to another or to the next until you make sure you memorize it properly. Let's say you are memorizing Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, and you started Surah Al-Baqarah, you finished it. You don't move to Ali Imran until you are sure, you are certain you memorized it. You memorize Surah Al-Baqarah properly. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a person may memorize it quickly, and he could recite it the next day, he could recite it next week without any mistakes, he could even recite it next month without any mistakes. He would think that he memorized it properly, and then he would move on to Ali Imran. This is not the case. Being able to recite the whole surah without any mistakes, it doesn't mean that you memorized it. It means that it is sitting in the short-term memory. It still didn't move to the long-term. To be able to move it to the long-term memory, you need to still repeat it even though you think you know it. Which means that if we have to draw a graph of this, it's going to be something like this over time. Something like this over time. Which means that at the beginning, you're going to be reviewing the surah. Let's say, just as an example, let's say you memorize Surah Al-Baqarah, you finished. You have to review it every day, let's say for 2-3 weeks or 4 weeks. And then you review it every 3 days for another 2-3 weeks. And then you review it every week for the next 3-4 months, right? And then you keep doing this. Even after you move on to another surah, you're still doing this. You're still doing this. You're still going back once in a while and reviewing that surah to make sure you move it to the long-term memory. This is something that I thought I understood and I practice it, but I think that it should be given more importance. And I have seen the difference with the surah that I have done this with properly compared to other ones that maybe I moved on too quickly to the next surah.
So would you stop memorizing until you fixed it, or would you continue to memorize while you're repeating this cycle?
Well, let's say you have a plan. you have a plan, right? And I gave you something just now as an example. Let's say you decide to review it every day for 3 weeks, and then every 2 days for another 3 weeks, every 3 days for another 3 weeks, every 4 days for another 3 weeks, and so on. So after you reach a certain point, you decide to move to the next surah. But then this program doesn't stop. The program of Al-Baqarah doesn't stop. It is only moved to, I will get to it inshallah, the method. How do we memorize and how do we review? It will be moved to the reviewing program, because now you moved to another surah, right? So the reviewing will be less intense, so that now you have time to go to another surah, but you would have put like enough effort to move it to long-term memory, right? You can try it with one surah and see how it works. If it works, then you do the same thing for the next surah that you memorize. Of course, knowing the words, knowing the meaning will help in memorizing. This is obvious, and of course, listening to it. I suggest listening to the surah before you memorize it, listening to it so many times, and then when you come to memorize it, you memorize it quickly because you heard it so many times. The tasmi'ah, of course, reciting to an actual person, to a sheikh, or at least a person that can find the mistakes, because sometimes you may think that you memorize the words properly, and then you find that you missed an ayah, or you missed a word, or you added a word, or you didn't do the tajweed properly. So you have to recite it to another person if possible. Now, people always ask about how much time does it take to memorize the whole Quran. This is the most popular question, right? There's no real time frame. And of course, we have to understand, like we talked about the short-term memory, a person may memorize it very quickly. But that's not the end of the project. He could memorize the whole Quran quickly, but then that's not the end. Is he going to keep it? That's the biggest challenge. The challenge of keeping it is bigger than memorizing it. Memorizing it, I know actually many people, and I was defending the idea of having local people lead the Taraweeh, local people. And I was defending this idea in front of people who were in charge of a big organization. And I told them, and I had people who memorize the Quran with me, some young people, and I asked one of them to tell these people how long did it take him to memorize. This is a local brother. And he told them 8 months. 8 months. I told them, for the amount of money that you spend on bringing somebody from outside, and it costs about $7,000 to bring somebody from outside, covering all the expenses and stuff. I told them, if you give me $7,000 or even $5,000, I prefer to give it to this guy, local guy. Give him $5,000, he will memorize it from scratch. I'm not going to bring somebody who already memorized it. We'll make you a new hafiz from scratch. Give him $5,000, he deserves it more than anybody else. He will appreciate it more. You are investing in your local people. So it could take 8 months, it could take less. Some people memorize it in 27 days. It's very hard to believe. There's a lot of people who memorize it in a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 8 months. If you memorize one ayah a day, it takes 17 years. 17 years, we think it's a long time. I personally met somebody many years ago when he said, I led Salatul Taraweeh for 15 years. I said, MashaAllah, that's a long time. And before I know it, I led Taraweeh for 15 years. Right? So when you look back, it's not a long time. It's not a long time. If you are doing something good, if you have a project between your hands, after 15 years or 20 years, when you look back, you feel happy because at least you did something. But if you look back after 15, 20 years and you don't find anything, then it's a problem. The achievement, what did you achieve? After 15, 20 years, which passed just like this, what did we achieve? We look back, we see there's not very much, right? So 17 years, 1 ayah a day. It may seem like a long time. We used to do it in masjid, in a local masjid. We used to do 2 ayat a day. 2 ayat. So we sit down after Fajr. We recite them. Everybody who is sitting there recites the 2 ayat, the same ones. And the Shaykh would explain the tafsir or say something about them. And then the next day we'll move on. And I remember myself that I didn't have to review those 2 ayat. After everybody read those 2 ayat so many times, that's it, it's good enough. But then after 2-3 months, people are complaining now, really. We're starting to forget the beginning because it's so much that now the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, we have trouble with it. But a few people succeeded and a few people left. So that's for the amount of time. This is the method. All right. Before I talk about the method, I wrote something on the board here, and you're probably wondering what it is. What do you think it is? All right. This is something that one of the brothers, Sheikh Uthman, may Allah give him good health, who is a local Sheikh, he told me this is how we used to remember Surah Al-Rahman. Surah Al-Rahman. Because in Surah Al-Rahman, there's so many times, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. And I remember saying that the best person who recited this surah was actually Sheikh Muhammad Ayyub. So it's very challenging to remember what comes after فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. So Sheikh Uthman, he said when he was small, this is what they used to use. This is a trick to help a person remember what comes after it. So this is basically the first letter of the ayah that comes right after, or you can say before, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Right? خَلَقَ الْإِنسان, that's the first one. رَبُّ الْمَشْرِقَيْنِ وَرَبُّ الْمَغْرِبَيْنِ, the second one. And then مَرَجَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ يَلْتَقِيَانِ, and so on. But then there was another Sheikh with us, Sheikh Abu Bakr. He said it's more challenging to memorize this than to memorize Surah Al-Rahman. But this is just to show that people have their own, sometimes they have their own tricks on how to remember certain things, right? How to remember certain things. And this is one of them. It may work for a person, and it may not work for another. So there are methods that you find that are different from one country to another. There was a TV program done by this sheikh. He was a reciter, a famous reciter. I think it is Fahd al-Kandari, who is a famous reciter, I think from Kuwait, if I'm not mistaken. He went to different countries, different Muslim countries, even in some non-Muslim countries as well. I think he went to Russia as well. And he visited the places where they memorize the Quran. And they showed how do they do it. And I remember him going to Russia, to this place where this Russian man came and converted to Islam, and he was blind, and he used to come every day and memorize the Quran. And he was probably over 70 or over 80 years old. So in some countries you will find that they use the method where you write. So the teacher would dictate the ayah or the ayat to the students. They would write it on this this tablet, which is different than the modern tablet, and then they would memorize it. And I remember people from Libya telling me that after they memorize the Quran, they have to write it 3 times in this method. And those who wrote it 3 times, it's like it's more stronger than long-term memory. It's like it's written in stones, basically. It is a method that is very, very effective. And you will find in some other countries where they recite in groups, in unison. They all recite it with one voice, and they also review in this way. You will find in other countries where they walk around a structure and they read while they are walking. So there was actually a good program talking about these different methods. And one of the things that this sheikh said that I kind of agree with is that a lot of people from these countries, they would say our method is the best. Right? When we heard it so many times, they would say our method is the best, obviously. But he said there's no such thing as the best method. On the contrary, I believe what he said is true in terms of every method has something good in it. And if a person is able to like combine these methods, he will probably come up with the best method, if there's such thing. If he combines all of these methods, like the writing and the walking and the reading at the same time and all that. So people have developed this from experience, and they came out with their own method. But combining these methods may give you like an even stronger method. One of the local people gave me this method, the following method that I'm going to talk about, hopefully briefly. As I said, now the number one complaint about people when they are memorizing the Quran, either they are memorizing the whole Quran or part of it or a juz or a surah, it's the same complaint, is that you memorize it today, you think you know it, and then you start forgetting the beginning of it. We say that this is a normal thing. It's a normal process. You have to keep reviewing it so that it goes into long-term memory. After it goes into long-term memory, it doesn't mean that you are not going to review it. You still have to review it. Obviously, if a person memorizes something when he is small, then it is likely to be stronger than somebody who is older. But it doesn't mean at the same time that it is impossible for somebody who is older, because there is a lot of people who are much older than we are, who are like 80 and even older than 80, who memorized the whole Quran. Some of them didn't even know how to read and write. So it's not impossible. It is better if somebody is younger. So memorizing is basically a repetitive task, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala made this Quran in such a way that it has to be reviewed. If you don't review it, then it goes away. So it has to be reviewed all the time. So the method that I go with, as taught by this brother, is to have 2 different programs. One program for memorizing and one separate program for reviewing. 2 separate programs, independent from each other. Of course, it is said that Hafs, the reciter, famous, whose recitation we are using today, he got sick. He got sick, and he was bedridden for 2 years. For 2 years, he was down. And they said that after he became better, he stood up and recited the whole Quran in one shot. Like, imagine now, in 2 years he didn't review it. he was down completely. and he recited it without a single mistake. Of course, these are people from the past, right? But I have seen people nowadays. We had the privilege of having this sheikh from, I remember him, from Saudi Arabia, who visited us in Vancouver, Sheikh Yasser al-Salama, and we prayed Taraweeh behind him for the whole month of Ramadan. He memorizes, obviously, the whole Quran, and Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. And this guy, subhanAllah, we prayed behind him the whole month, and I was pretty much behind him all the time. He just didn't make mistakes. He just recites. He doesn't make mistakes. And except one day, like we invited him for iftar. And the brothers, it was a group of brothers who made like a lot of food. And they made, I think these brothers were specialized in making foods and stuff. They made a lot of different things. A lot of different things. So the sheikh, he was asking, what is this? And they will explain to him, and then they will eat. What's this? And they would. After he finished eating, he said, imagine this. We were like a big group of people. He said, I'm sorry, but I have to lay down. So he laid down in front of us, right? We were sitting with him. He just couldn't. He laid down. And then he told me, I have to go. Let's go. So, because I was driving him, he said, I need to run. Before I get into the car, I need to go and run around the block a little bit. So I went to get the car, and this brother in Vancouver with his like traditional dress, he was running, going back and forth. And then I took him to the hotel. That night, he stopped. While he was reciting, he stopped and he couldn't continue. He just couldn't. It was the first time, like, he couldn't continue. I mean, he continued afterwards with difficulty after eating so much food. So this reminded me of people having like a very good memory. Now, this method of having a separate program, memorizing and reviewing, Sheikh Khalid, who was in Richmond locally, who prayed with us many years, and he used to lead Taraweeh. He used to lead the Taraweeh, and then, of course, the days were longer during the winter. He used to lead Salat Taraweeh by himself, and then at midnight, he will come with a small group of people and lead the Qiyam, and then they go and sleep a little bit, and they come back before Fajr and lead another Qiyam. And they finished like 3 khatmat, one in Taraweeh by himself. And the ones he was doing at night, they used to turn off the lights. They were people were not able to correct him if he made mistakes, but he didn't make any mistakes. I actually listened to him. He was reading to me Surah Al-Baqarah, Ali Imran, and An-Nisa, and he didn't make any mistakes. Like, whenever he makes a mistake, I would tap on the board, and he would repeat it and correct the mistake. I never had to tell him what the ayah was or what the correction was. So he said this method, he used it, and he said for 6 months, he didn't have to review from Al-Baqarah to somewhere Tawbah, or almost half of the Quran. He said, I didn't have to review that part for 6 months. This is how strong. I'm talking about very strong memorization, and I have seen it myself. So the program is, of course, it's an individual program. I used to distribute this table where you have to write down the amount you're going to memorize, let's say every day or every week or every month. Usually it's either a daily program or a weekly program, so that it's consistent. So you would put, let's say, anywhere from 1 ayah a day or 1 ayah a week. I don't imagine like a person making 1 ayah, just 1 ayah a week. But let's say 1 ayah a day or a week. And then he would put the date. Let's say this week, this ayah. This week, the next week, ayah number 2. And then the following week, ayah number 3. The surah and the ayah number. whether he's memorizing the whole Quran or a surah or the juz, the last juz, he can easily write this down because it's a simple process. 1 ayah a day or 1 ayah a week, and fill in the table. The review program is similar in a way that you're going to write down a date. Let's say if you're doing something daily, you put today I have to review 5 times as much. If you are memorizing 1 ayah a day, it's easy to review like 5 ayat or even 10 ayat, because you're not going to memorize them. You already memorize them. You just have to review them, or a page. So on the memorization table, you have the date and the amount for every day or every week. A review program, you have the date and you have the amount, but the amount obviously is much more than the memorization. And the review goes from the beginning of what you know up to the end. And then it circles back to the beginning. Beginning to end, beginning to end, beginning to end. It always goes in circle. It always goes in circle. And of course, starting from the top. Let's say if you start from Amma Yatasa'alun, then it goes from Amma Yatasa'alun to An-Nas, and then go back to Amma and then Nas, Amma and then Nas, like this. Or if it is Baqarah, you go Baqarah and then Nas, Baqarah and Nas, Baqarah and Nas, like this. So if it is, and you can try this. If you find it hard to review 5 ayat a day, you can drop it to 3. If you find it easy to review 5, you can go to 10 and see if it works, and then you continue. Be consistent with 10. You cannot like switch back and forth. At the beginning you are testing, but then you stick to something, stick to one thing, and then you do it no matter what. So the review program, you can see that it's an independent program. It's going in circles, The memorization, even if it is little, it goes always forward, and it doesn't worry about the beginning of the surah, which is being forgotten, because that's a different program. It's taken care of by the review program, right? Of course, part of memorizing an ayah or a surah or a page, you're going to have to go back and repeat it, go back and repeat it, go back and repeat it. But then if it is a long surah, like Surah Al-Baqarah, you cannot always go back to the beginning of the surah, because it's such a huge surah that you cannot just go back, and if you are towards the end, you cannot just go back and within the memorization program, go back to the beginning. You can only go back so much. The rest, the beginning, is taken care of by the review program. And of course, the review program is not only to review what you memorize, it's also to keep everything in place. Let's say in Surah Al-Baqarah, there is many spots that are similar. So the review program, because it's going in circle, so it is basically remembering where everything is, the ayat that are similar. يا بني إسرائيل اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم وأوفوا بعهدي أوفي بعهدكم يا بني إسرائيل اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم وأني فضلتكم على العالمين, and those kind of things. They are similar ayat. See where they are. لا تجزي نفس عن نفس شيئا ولا يقبل منها شفاعة. شفاعة, here the word شفاعة, in one place it's شفاعة, in the next place is عدل. لا يقبل منها عدل. So they are reversed. The first one لا يقبل منها شفاعة ولا يؤخذ منها عدل ولا هم ينصرون. The second one لا يؤخذ منها عدل ولا تقبل منها شفاعة ولا هم ينصرون. So these ones, they are in different places. So the review program will help in knowing where each one is, right, and keep them in that in their respective places. A table like this, I wrote this table a long time ago, where I have the on one side I have the surah, and then I have the hizb, what hizb, and I have a few a word or two to know which how the hizb starts, And then I have check boxes, which means that every time you review that, you can have your own way of doing it. Every time you review that ruba or that page, you just check mark, and then go. If you fear that you're going to forget. Yeah, and one of the important things that I didn't mention is that when you are memorizing, let's say, an ayah, try to read at least one word from the next ayah, especially if it is you're going from one page to another. If you're going from one page to another, you read at least one word of the next ayah or the next page so that they are connected. They are connected. Sometimes the problem is that you finish the page and you don't know how the next page starts, right? Or you finish the ayah and then you don't know how the next ayah starts. I personally, most of the time, and I don't know if it's true for most people, I don't have a problem with the ayah itself, for the most part. I don't have a problem within the ayah itself, except the long ayah that has like tricky stuff. But the transition from one ayah to another could be more difficult, or one page to another. Or sometimes it's like you skip 2 pages instead of instead of turning one page. It's like you're turning pages and you turn 2 pages instead of one. It happened to me yesterday. So it's like, especially when they are similar. It's like a similar continuation, but you find yourself in 2 pages later. So that's one thing to remember. All right, any questions? It may be a good idea, and this is what I do personally, to recite, and you'll find this also in the books of the books talking about this topic. Recite whatever you memorized during the salawat, whether you are praying by yourself or in a jama'ah or reading. You recite whatever you memorized. Or what you can do is recite during the fara'id, for example, or during the day, during the fara'id, you recite whatever you memorized, either whatever you memorized that day or the last few days. And in Salat al-Witr, you recite whatever you reviewed that day. Like from the review program, you use it in Salat al-Witr because it's bigger. It's most likely bigger. It's like 3, 4 times, 5 times bigger. So you recite it in Salat al-Witr. And in the Fara'id, you recite whatever you memorized that day. Of course, depending on the size, you may have to divide it between 2, 3 salawat or circle around it, right? Let's say if you have, let's say you memorized 2 pages that day. You read half a page in every rak'ah, or you divide that page into 3. You read, third of a page in every rak'ah of the salawat in that day. And then if your review program is, let's say, 6 pages or more or less, you do it in Salat al-Witr if you are able to do that. So that's the best way of helping in both memorizing and reviewing, and it will help make the ayat that you memorized or you're trying to review stick, and it will help in moving them from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. The other thing you can do, and I do this as much as I'm able to, is just before you sleep, when you are in bed and you are about to sleep, you're not going to recite aloud then, right? And there may be people around you or whatever, or you may be too tired to actually recite, but you just run that tape in your head, right? That, let's say if it's a page, you just run it, you go through it in your head. And you may sleep before you finish that page, it doesn't matter, but it helps, it has like a great impact on reviewing or memorizing. Actually, one of the brothers was complaining to this Sheikh Khalid about him not being able to sleep at night. He said, just recite just recite Quran. He said the shaitan will make you sleep because he doesn't want you to, he will not want you to recite. So he will. He said, since that day, I sleep like a baby. So that's a good way of falling asleep, basically. And I remember holding a mushaf, a small mushaf. You know, those small masahif. I used to have one myself. A long time ago to this brother. Maybe he was going to the washroom or whatever. And when I looked at it, you know, I was looking at it and it seems like extremely dirty, you know, from, you know, how many times like you open it and stuff. It was completely almost black, right, from, you know, touching it and using it. And I thought, yeah, it may be a good thing. You know, at the end of the day, if it is new, you know, if the page is like in some masahif, the masahif I don't like using in some masajid, you open the mushaf and the mushaf is so fresh, so new, that it doesn't stay open. It goes closed. I hate using those masahif because you can't keep it open. So that's like a mushaf that hasn't been used. If you have a mushaf that hasn't been used, like this brother had a mushaf that obviously was used quite a bit. And I thought, yeah, at the end of the day, it's a good sign. He's using it quite a bit. You know, it's normal that it may start tearing apart and it may start being dirty and stuff. I mean, it's normal. Anyway, if I remember something else, something else skipped my mind. But if I remember it, I will come back to it, inshallah. We'll recite from Surah At-Tawbah again. This time, we'll start with Brother Ahmed. And you are the only one opening the mushaf. One thing, yeah, I remember then. I remember, since we're talking about this topic, when I was small, we used to go to a masjid that was farther away from our masjid, because in our masjid, first we had this sheikh who is older and he doesn't know Tajweed, and we were like trying to learn Tajweed and stuff. So we were going to a masjid. You know, in Muslim country, you don't usually go far away to find a masjid. So if you go far away, that means it's like it must be worth it. So we used to go to this masjid, which is like a huge masjid, and he had like a sheikh that I learned from. He's one of the sheikhs that the early sheikhs that I learned from, just by listening to the Tarawih. And I learned later on that he had a Tajweed halaqah in his masjid, and then the student didn't used to give big importance to the Tajweed halaqah. I was shocked, because I thought if we had this sheikh in our masjid, we would have taken advantage of it. But the reality in this life, that's not the case. And the same feeling is expressed by the tabi'een, some of them. They told some of the Sahaba, if the Prophet ﷺ lived with us, we would not have let him touch the ground. That means we would have lifted him, right, from the respect. And you have a Prophet with you. And the Sahaba, of course, replied with a long story, just to show them that you couldn't have done more than what we did. You couldn't have. And obviously, it is very obvious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose those people because they were the best, right? So similarly, I mean, it's the same feeling that we have in many communities, if not most of them. When you have somebody, we don't give him the importance like we are supposed to give the person the importance. If we had Sheikh Al-Husari, may Allah have mercy on him, today with us here in Victoria, I'm 100% almost sure that we would not have taken benefit from it until he dies. And you say, oh, Sheikh, there was like a big Sheikh. We have in Vancouver, Brother Mustafa knows, one of the biggest scholars in this Muslim world, one of the biggest. He had a PhD in 1969, like before I was born, and he was part of the fiqh council of the Rabitat al-Alam al-Islami, the Muslim World League, for probably 30, 40, 50 years. And he's right here. Was he respected, given like the respect that he deserves as a scholar, as a world-renowned scholar? No. That's the sad reality that we live in today. Ayah 117 to Ayah 122.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لقد تاب الله على النبي والمهاجرين والأنصار الذين اتبعوه في ساعة العسرة من بعد ما كاد يزيغ قلوب فريق منهم ثم تاب عليهم إنه بهم رؤوف رحيم وعلى الثلاثة الذين خلفوا حتى إذا ضاقت عليهم الأرض بما رحبت وضاقت عليهم أنفسهم وظنوا أن لا ملجأ من الله إلا إليه ثم تاب عليهم ليتوبوا إن الله هو التواب الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين ما كان لأهل المدينة ومن حولهم من الأعراب إن يتخلفوا عن رسول الله ولا يرغبوا بأنفسهم عن نفسه ذلك بأنهم لا يصيبهم ظمأ ولا نصب ولا مخصمة ولا مخمصة في سبيل الله ولا يطعون موطئا يغيظ الكفار ولا ينالون من عدو نيلا إلا كتب لهم به عمل صالح إن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين ولا ينفقون نفقة صغيرة ولا كبيرة ولا يقطعون
واديا إلا
كتب لهم
ليجزيهم
الله أحسن ما كانوا
يعملون
وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة.
What kind of mud is this? What kind of mud?
مد اللازم.
How long?
6.
All right, say it again.
ما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة.
كافة. فلولا نفر
من كل فرقة منهم
The word فرقة here is the ra soft or strong?
Well, before it is kasra, it should be softer.
All right, do you agree with him? There is a qaf after it, yes.
So either it is optional, it's optional.
Optional. That means either soft or strong. That's what you...
No, yeah, there's something about the harf that stand out. I think in the table it said either this or that, so it could be read as firqatin or farqatin, right?
That's what I thought. I personally had to look at the table to confirm one thing. In the table it says firqin. It doesn't say firqatin. It's not the same thing. I mean, it's a similar word, right? In the table, in the last row of the table, it's talking about firqin. It's not talking about firqatin. Because remember, you remember now? It is strong, yeah. because one of the cases where it is strong, it's when there is harf isti'la after it that has no kasra. Huh? I think in the table it says it has no kasra. Because having a kasra, in this case we'll put it in the case of firqin, right? So in the table it says ra with sukoon before it kasra, and harf isti'la without a kasra. So it could be anything without the kasra, because it's the kasra that makes it the lowest level of isti'la, the less strength. All right.
So this one is
مفخمة, yeah, فرقة.
وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة
ليتفقهوا
في الدين
ولينذروا
قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون.
جزاك الله خير. Brother Hanif.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لقد تاب الله على النبي والمهاجرين والأنصار الذين اتبعوه في ساعة العسرة من بعد ما كاد يزيغ قلوب فريق وعلى الثلاثة الذين خلفوا حتى إذا ضاقت عليهم الأرض بما رحبت وضاقت عليهم أنفسهم وظنوا أن لا ملجأ من الله إلا إليه ثم تاب عليهم ليتوبوا إن الله هو التواب الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين ما كان لأهل المدينة ومن حولهم من الأعراب أن يتخلفوا عن رسول الله ولا يرغبوا بأنفسهم عن نفسه ذلك بأنهم لا يصيبهم ظمأ ولا نصب ولا مخمصة في سبيل الله ولا يطعون موطئا يغيظ الكفار ولا ينالون من عدو نيلا إلا كتب لهم به عمل صالح إن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين ولا ينفقون نفقة صغيرة ولا كبيرة ولا يقطعون واديا إلا كتب لهم ليجزيهم الله أحسن ما كانوا يعملون وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون.
جزاك الله خير. تفضل مصطفى.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لقد تاب الله على النبي والمهاجرين والأنصار الذين اتبعوه في ساعة العسرة من بعد ما كاد يزيغ قلوب فريق منهم ثم تاب عليهم إنه بهم رءوف رحيم. وعلى الثلاثة الذين خلفوا حتى إذا ضاقت عليهم الأرض بما رحبت وضاقت عليهم أنفسهم وظنوا أن لا ملجأ من الله إلا إليه ثم تاب عليهم ليتوبوا إن الله هو التواب الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. ما كان لأهل المدينة ومن حولهم من الأعراب أن يتخلفوا عن رسول الله ولا يرغبوا بأنفسهم عن نفسه ذلك بأنهم لا يصيبهم ظمأ ولا نصب ولا مخمصة في سبيل الله ولا يطؤون موطئا يغيظ الكفار موطئا يغيظ الكفار ولا ينالون من عدو نيلا إلا كتب لهم به عمل صالح إن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين ولا ينفقون نفقة صغيرة ولا كبيرة ولا يقطعون واديا إلا كتب لهم ليجزيهم الله أحسن ما كانوا يعملون وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون.
So فرقة is soft or strong? فرقة soft or strong?
Strong.
All right. And وَلْيُنذِرُوا?
For the ra, it's strong.
All right. Was it strong enough? وَلْيُنذِرُوا. It was not strong enough. And the word ظَمَأٌ. ظَمَأٌ. I don't know if any of you noticed. The meme was too strong. ظَمَأٌ. You said ظَمَأٌ. It's like you made the meme too strong because of the dha. This is what the long ayah 120.
ذلك بأنهم لا يصيبهم ظمأ.
I mean the tricky one was مخمصة, right? مخمصة is one of those words that are tricky because you have soft and then strong, soft, strong. مخمصة and صياصيهم سورة الأحزاب. This is a similar word to this. All right. لقد تاب الله على النبي والمهاجرين والأنصار الذين اتبعوه في ساعة العسرة من بعد ما كاد يزيغ قلوب فريق منهم ثم تاب عليهم إنه بهم رؤوف رحيم وعلى الثلاثة الذين خلفوا حتى إذا ضاقت عليهم الأرض بما رحبت وضاقت عليهم أنفسهم وظنوا أن لا ملجأ من الله إلا إليه ثم تاب عليهم ليتوبوا إن الله هو التواب الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين ما كان لأهل المدينة ومن حولهم من الأعراب أن يتخلفوا عن رسول الله ولا يرغبوا بأنفسهم عن نفسه ذلك بأنهم لا يصيبهم ظمأ ولا نصب ولا مخمصة في سبيل الله ولا يطؤون موطئا يغيظ الكفار ولا ينالون من عدو نيلا إلا كتب لهم به عمل صالح إن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين ولا ينفقون نفقة صغيرة ولا كبيرة ولا يقطعون واديا إلا كتب لهم ليجزيهم الله أحسن ما كانوا يعملون وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون. Alright. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.